morning and welcome to Woodstown. Thank you very much for setting your clocks ahead in a timely fashion. So, I'd like to introduce Fred Stein. He's the Citizen Action Coordinator for the Delaware River-keeper Network. He's a community organizer and an advocacy coordinator. He got his feet wet, and that's in quotes there, with Riverkeeper as a volunteer monitoring the water quality in the Cooper River in Camden County. They were hired by the Riverkeeper in '91, and Fred has helped area residents get a seat at the table where decisions are being made that will affect the creeks and streams that flow through their neighborhoods. Fred has helped train and teach concerned citizens how to monitor water quality, prepare oral testimony, write grants, research agency files and regulations, plant riparian buffers, and created wetlands, all to help them become empowered and effective riverkeepers. So, thank you for all that great work. This is amazing. We're not that close to the Delaware. We're close enough, but we have a lot of tributaries that are coming in.
Oh, sure.
Even just behind the meeting is one of the little creeks, Woodstown thing. So, yes.
It's not the Mulligan down here, is it? Oldman's.
Oldman's Creek.
Oldman.
Yes,
Yeah.
Oldman's Creek. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And then, what's the one up in Swedesboro?
Raccoon.
Raccoon Creek. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Raccoon
So,
goes further down.
and then just south of Salem. So, all right. Thank you, Fred.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, everyone. Can you hear this all right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and I spent some of my greatest summers at Roosevelt Scout Reservation too, right on Alloways Creek, and so that's like I love being down here. So I really appreciate and appreciate your invitation. So the presentation I put together today was like the big picture, like the Delaware River, the Delaware River-keeper Network, and some of our victories and some of our losses, some of our challenges that we still have moving forward, and ways that you guys can all participate if you choose to. All right. So So the Delaware Riverkeeper Network is a nonprofit or environmental advocacy organization. We started in 1998, which is not that long ago. But our mission is to champion the rights of the communities of the Delaware River and the tributary streams, like the Oldman's Creek and the Mullick, all the streams that flow into the Delaware, so that it's free-flowing, clean, and healthy, and abundant with a diversity of life. So that kind of captures a lot of different things, and we'll go over some of that as we some of the projects will bring that to light. So the Delaware River is this presentation I gave last year to Rowan University at a couple of classes at Rowan. So that star is at Rowan, so it's a little bit north of you, but it's so big it really covers the meeting house, so I didn't move it. So the Delaware River starts. I wonder if this is a pointer. No, that's right. I don't need it. Yeah, I'm positive. So the Delaware River is 13,529 square miles in size, and you can see the red area. It starts up in the Catskill Mountains of New York, all the way up in the Catskill Mountains, where the rainwater flows off of those mountains and flows into streams, and then bigger streams, and then rivers, and it works its way down, all the way down through the Poconos and the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area, up there, down past Philly and Camden, all the way down here, and then out to the Delaware Bay, and on out to the Atlantic Ocean. The river provides a tremendous amount of benefits to us all. So it provides drinking water for 15 million people, right? The river itself, Camden County has a direct pipe that comes from the Delran area and takes water to lower Camden County. It filters and cleans and stuff like that, but the aquifers is where most people get their drinking water from, but it also takes, the river also provides drinking water for New York City. 8.5 million people in New York City get their drinking water from the Delaware River. Up in that red area, there are massive reservoirs, Cannonsville and Nevasink, and there's two other massive reservoirs in the Catskill Mountains, and there's a huge pipe that takes water. In fact, there are images online. You can see huge dump trucks, maintenance going into these pipes and back. They take water from there all the way down into New York City to provide drinking water to New York City. So it provides drinking water for 15 million people, $22 billion in economic benefit and activity, all the ports in Philadelphia and Camden and Salem, commercial fishing, recreational fishing, all of those things, and paddling, rafting rentals and canoe rentals and all of that. It's part of the economic activity. 600,000 direct and indirect jobs, $10 billion in wages, and $683 billion in ecosystem services. I wanted to make sure I had good. Do you guys know what ecosystem services are? There's going to be a test. So I don't see anybody with a pen going. Why? There's going to be a surprise test. You have Martha to thank. So just some ecosystem services, and I did a quick. If you have a pollinator garden in the front of your house, right? Those wildflowers, bees will pollinate those flowers and make honey. Those flowers are providing you a service. They're creating honey. That's a very, very basic example of ecosystem services. But the wetlands in our communities and stuff, wetlands are the kidneys of the waterways. The polluted water, runoff from parking lots, etc., can go into a wetland, and that wetland can help clean up and filter those pollutants. So that wetland is providing an economic service. If it wasn't for an environmental, but also an economic service, if it wasn't for that, we may have to build a water treatment facility that manages that volume of water. So those wetlands provide an ecosystem service. If you go into the center city, and there's trees all around you, and the trees block the sun, and it's nice and cool in that park. Those trees are providing a service, because if it wasn't for those trees, maybe the houses would have to run air conditioning more or whatever. And those trees absorb rainwater, so that rainwater that could flood communities now is being absorbed by the trees and evapotranspired up into the environment. So those trees provide an ecosystem service. And that's what this point is here, is $683 billion worth of ecosystem services because of the river and all the natural resources around it. So it's important, not just for tree huggers and lovers of the environment, but it's important for us economically too. And these numbers that I just read are from the Delaware, I think, the Delaware River Basin Commission, and they're from 2016. So what's that? That's 8 years ago, right? So these numbers are probably significantly higher today. And just a little bit about a watershed, just so we all live no matter where you live in a watershed. Even if you're out in the desert, you live in a watershed. And a watershed is just an area of land that drains to a particular body of water. We all live in the Delaware River watershed. If you live in Woodstown, maybe more specifically, you might live in the Oldman's Creek watershed, but the Oldman's Creek watershed is part of the Delaware River watershed. I live up in Haddon Township, Camden County, and the Cooper River, the runoff from my front yard goes down into the Cooper River, which flows into Camden, which flows into the Delaware, and then down here. And just a little bit of, this is probably, intellectually we all recognize this. This is a little schematic of an agricultural area. I don't know if you can see that okay, but it's a little cutaway of an area of land. and there's farming. Here the brown is all farming, and you can see the forests and stuff like this. And under normal ecological situations, hydrologic situations, you have 100% of the rainwater coming down. About 50% of that goes into the ground, soaks down into the ground, recharges our aquifer where we all get our drinking water, or most of us get our drinking water. About 10% runs off the land and out into the stream and then out into the ocean. And about 40% evaporates and goes back up into the environment. That's kind of a rural hydrologic cycle that we have, and that's what we have down here in Woodstown. When we develop the land, though, it changes, right? That makes sense. So this other cutaway here, it shows the same 100%, but instead of 50% of that rainwater infiltrating into the ground, only about 15% goes into the ground. And instead of only 10% washing off into the creek, you have 55% washes into the creek. And that's because now instead of having farmlands and forests and big properties, you have a lot of impervious surfaces. You have the Walmart parking lot. You have, the factory. You have, college parking lots and things like that. That rainwater doesn't infiltrate anymore. It washes right off and goes right into the stream. So we've changed the ecological cycle, or the hydrologic cycle. And so that's transitioning. I'll come back to that. But so it's because of that transition of going from a rural community to a more urban community. I want to first take a look back a little bit on the history of, when you have that runoff, there's some pollutants that wash off the land. And the point of this slide is that we've improved a lot over the decades. And these are some images from back in the 50s and the 60s. This is the Cayuga River in Ohio. I don't know if you've ever heard, has anyone ever heard of the Cayuga River? It's a case study in environmental regulation, and the reason we had the Clean Water Act being written and enforced. And so the Cayuga River out in Ohio was so polluted because it was an industrial waterfront. So much contamination went into the waterway that it routinely caught on fire. There was so much oil and gas and chemicals in the water. And this was back in the 60s. And actually, on our recent past in the 50s and 60s, but you can see since 1868, the river caught on fire 13 times. And it was because of that we have the Clean Water Act. And it wasn't just in Ohio, it was everywhere there was an industrialized area. These are Philadelphia waterfront pictures, and it was the same in Philadelphia. There are stories of airplane pilots coming into the city in the 40s and the 50s where the pollution in the Delaware River was so strong and it stunk so much that even flying in on an airplane, you could smell the Delaware River as you were coming into the airport. Dock workers in Philly would pass out because there was such a chemical soup, effluent from sewer treatment plants and discharges from factories. People would pass out working on the docks. So it wasn't any better in Philadelphia. But again, thanks to the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act, we've come a long way. That those pollutants, our waterways are much healthier now. I mean, you can do yoga on a stand-up board at Penn's Landing in Philadelphia now, and it's like people go to concerts next to Penn's Landing because of the Clean Water Act. It didn't happen because the industrialists and the business owners said, let's do the right thing. It happened because a combination of things. People spoke up. People started recognizing there was an economic an economic cost and an environmental cost. So they worked together and started and came up with the Clean Water Act, and now they monitor and manage those pollutants. So that was like a historic look. This is the issues that we're dealing with today. Stormwater runoff is the biggest problem that we have in our water, in our streams and creeks and streams today. The US EPA has found that sediment and water temperature are the two biggest threats to our waterways today. And even though you're down here and Oldman's is still a very rural waterway, there's been changes to the Oldman's Creek too. There was just recently there was a challenge to Oldman's Creek when a warehouse wanted to expand. A warehouser wanted to expand right next to Oldman's Creek, and that could have, folks spoke up, and that project at least got put on pause for a while. But if that would have been built, that would have been, instead of having what's there now, maybe a 2-acre footprint with a rooftop and parking lot, could have expanded to 4 acres, and it would have gotten bigger. The runoff would have increased. So the point of this issue, the point of this picture, is to show this is something we see all the time. I mean, this is a stormwater inlet from a parking lot going into that and into a pipe. Right, this is the way we normally set up our residential and commercial areas. Is the stormwater goes in there and it goes out of sight. You don't even think about it. But this is in my community. This is right down the street from my house. Where does that stormwater go? And this is what I'm saying, that stormwater is one of the biggest threats to our creeks and streams today. Is here you have, this is a pipe where that rainwater goes into it, and you think, oh, well, it's out of sight, out of mind, it's not a big deal. But it goes into, and this is just similar to what a lot of stormwater runoff and stormwater management issues are about. This is a Catholic high school. The pipe, the image on the left, is just your normal everyday discharge coming, because it used to be a stream. But during a storm event, you can see, and here's an image in the middle of the summertime, that same pipe you can easily kayak, because there's so much runoff coming from that parking lot. You could easily kayak in that same little stream, and you can see the amount of erosion that's happening from that outfall pipe. It's eating away the ground. The solution is just throwing large rocks down at the bottom of the embankment to hopefully dissipate some of that energy and reduce the amount of erosion. But that doesn't work. So something has to happen. And new regulations in New Jersey, and in fact, New Jersey is one of the leading states in the nation with innovative stormwater management rules. They're addressing these sorts of things. And this is what the creek looks like just downstream. Has anyone, if you've ever gone up into Haddon Township, New Jersey, there's an area called Sadler's Woods. I don't know if you've ever been there. It's worth a trip. It's a 25-acre old-growth forest, and it's right in the middle of shopping centers and grocery stores and many schools that my kids went to school with in Haddon Township. But there are trees there that were saplings when Ben Franklin was walking the streets of Philadelphia. We had the Academy of Natural Sciences came in and cored and aged some of the trees, and they're over 200 years old. And this woodlands was slated to become soccer fields. And the community rose up and spoke up, and we ended up saving the woods, finding a solution to the demand for soccer fields. But we saved these forests, and you can go up there. There's nice walking trails. You can go online and get a trail map, and it can take you around to this through the 25 acres. But there's still problems in Sadler's Woods. It's this stormwater runoff going into the woods, causing this erosion, and those are some of the issues we're dealing with today. And clearly, I mean, that sediment goes out just like it would here in Oldman's Creek. It goes out, it smothers aquatic ecosystems. You know, we're under all the rocks and the aquatic vegetation where beneficial insects live and breed and grow, get smothered by the dirt. And this is another common stormwater runoff issue you see here. The oil and gas that drips from our cars, where does that go? It goes right into those same stormwater inlets and out to the Oldman's Creek or out into my watershed, the Cooper River, and goes out into the Delaware. So those are some of the bigger issues that we're working on as far as stormwater management goes. Like I said, there are, in fact, just at the end of last year, there's new stormwater regulations that came into play that will control some of that stormwater. They consistently get a little bit more stringent, where if you want to build something, you have to manage your stormwater a little bit more responsibly and treat it a little bit more, get more going down into the ground and not just flashing off and going into the streams. So the second half of the presentation, I wanted to show you some of the projects that the Delaware River-keeper network's been involved in. We've won some and we've lost some. We tend to, in this kind of environment, we tend to lose a few more than we win, but the wins are significant. So, like I said, I gave this presentation last year to Rowan. I wanted to make it like hit home for Rowan. So this is an aerial view of the Rowan campus. And if you're familiar with where Route 322 goes right down through the downtown, right through the center of the school, and that road is right here, is 322. So now it's probably been 15 or 20 years ago, we were contacted, the Delaware River-keeper network was contacted, and we were asked, that Rowan Woods, which was right on Route 322, was the site where many students, biology students from Rowan, would walk across the street and do ecological surveys of forested. There was like a 7 or an 8 acre parcel of land. They'd go over and they'd measure trees. They'd study. There were wildlife and aquatic species and wetlands on there, and they'd use this 8 acres as an outdoor classroom. But we were called because Rowan was looking to build townhouses, right? Because Rowan universities are in competition with other universities to bring students in. So other college campuses were building townhouses because that was what the trend was. So they wanted to take this 8 acres, 7 or 8 acres, and cut down the woods and put in townhouses. So the image on the upper left is an aerial of Rowan Woods back in 2002. And you can see today's image, we lost that battle. Those were cut down, and the wetlands that were on site, the wetlands right in here, you can kind of see the lighter green vegetation. Those were the wetlands. That became the stormwater system, right? That's what. So they cut down the trees and they put the townhouses all in there, and now instead of having this more vibrant forest, they have townhouses. And that's the reality. I mean, that is the reality. I mean, the school needed it. It was easy. It was, you know, the DEP didn't do anything, weren't able to stop it. And so the wetlands that you would think that, well, that's going to protect the area. Well, now it's become the stormwater system. So this is one that we think, you know, this was definitely a loss. This is just another image of, this is what the interior of the forest looked like. This was some students doing some of that. And these were some of the trees that were cut down at the time. So another issue that the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, and we're having some success on, is in the Delaware River, there's a fish, the Atlantic sturgeon. Have you guys ever? This fish is like from as far back, goes back as far as the dinosaurs. I mean, it's that ancient, and the populations have been really low for decades, maybe 100 years. Philadelphia used to be known as the sturgeon capital of the East. And the sturgeon was, not sturgeon, caviar, the caviar capital of the East. And it was because of sturgeon eggs. Sturgeon was so populated, there were so many sturgeon in the Delaware River, lower Delaware River in the estuary. The folklore is that you could walk from Philadelphia to Camden on the backs of sturgeon because there were so many of them. But of course, now with the pollution that we saw images of from before and ships and loss of habitat, the populations of the Atlantic sturgeon have come crashing down. And right now there's only about 250 large fish of egg-laying and egg-laying age, the estimates in the Delaware River, that so the numbers are significantly lowered, down to 250. And the causes of them are the pollution going into the river, the lack of dissolved oxygen in the river, fish, the large ships coming up the river, the propellers will hit and strike fish, and the loss of habitat along the waterway. So one of the successes that we're having is that we recently had US EPA come out and say, you know what, we agree that the dissolved oxygen levels in the river are too low, especially when the young of life of the sturgeon are just starting to grow, are born and starting to grow. So what EPA has required now is the larger sewer treatment plants that discharge into the river, Philadelphia, Camden, and Wilmington, to upgrade their systems so that the effluent that they push out, you know, that they pump into the river, has lower nutrient levels, so the dissolved oxygen in the river will increase, and that helps protect, you know, it makes it so the stress levels on the sturgeon are less. So because now there's dissolved oxygen is at a higher level. So that was a success. I believe it's at 6.5 parts per million. The dissolved oxygen level, ideally for sturgeon, especially young sturgeon, is 6.5 parts per million in the river. The current statute only required it to be at 4 or 4.5 parts per million. Because of the Delaware Riverkeeper Network's petition, they've increased it. They've said, all right, you have, I think it's 6 years they have to bring that dissolved oxygen level up to 5.5 parts per million. So it's not all the way to 6.5, which is where science says it should be, to support that strong sturgeon population, but it's at 5.5. So it's an increase, and it is an improvement. It is a victory. This is another success story that we've had relatively recent. This is Petty's Island. Petty's Island is a 500-acre island between Camden and Philadelphia, just north of the Ben Franklin Bridge in Philly. If you've ever, I don't know, it's hard to see as you're unless you're right along Pennsauken or Camden waterfront or driving down 95. But this island on the left-hand side, you can see it was owned by Citgo. It's been industrialized for over 100 years. You can see the huge oil tanks and petroleum storage tanks on Petty's Island here. That's Ben Franklin Bridge up at the top. Petty's Island was owned by Citgo. Citgo wanted to sell it, and they wanted to donate it to the state of New Jersey for open space and a wildlife habitat, because not only because they were not only did they want to give it away for open space. The reason they did that was because if they gave it away or sold it for residential development, they would have to clean it up much better than if they wanted to give it away for open space, because the way the laws are written, the degree of cleanup is determined by the next land use. With residential, people are going to live there 24/7. They're going to be there for years, so the contaminated soils and groundwater and that sort of thing have to be cleaned up much better than if it's a parkland or an open, someplace people come and just visit there for a couple of hours on the weekend. And so the benefit to Citgo was economic savings and to be seen as environmentally responsible, that sort of thing. And that's actually what ended up happening. So after a 4.5-year battle, fighting politicians and the town of Pennsauken and the state of New Jersey, who all wanted it to be what a developer wanted. A developer wanted to come in and put 700 homes and a golf course and a hotel conference center complex on the island. We battled that back, and now today it's being cleaned up by Citgo to a safe degree. And now it's going to be on the left. You can see it's going to be an open space with large meadows. It's got a bald eagle's nest on it. It's got osprey on it today. It's got fox and wild turkeys and, of course, deer. But it's going to be open to the public. So that's 500 acres. That was industrial, could have gone to like a gated community where only the residents could go over and have access to. But now it'll be open to public passive recreation and outdoor education and that sort of thing. So this was a real positive benefit and success. That's from the southern end of Petty's Island. You could see why people would want to have their homes there, having that skyline across the way. And then I think these are my last couple of slides. This goes back. This is another success story, and this story plays out even down here in Gloucester and Salem County, all over wherever there's waterways. So this is an image of a riparian buffer. And a riparian buffer is just an area of land that's next to a waterway. Riparian just is the land area next to the waterway. And this is in Cooper River Park, up just down the street from where I live. And The waterway here is a man-made lake, and up here, there's a lot of competitive crewing and a lot of rowing going on. High schools and colleges and even Junior Olympics row crew out on Cooper River. What this image shows is the area right along the Cooper River is this lush vegetated area of tall grasses, shrubs, and trees that help protect the water quality of the Cooper River. This is what it used to look back in 1955. This same area, they maintained it. They came with their mowers because we just thought that, well, it's a park. People want to have access to the waterways. This is what a park should look like. So they would routinely mow the lawn right up alongside of the creek. This has to do with stormwater management, and a riparian buffer is a way of naturally protecting water quality and naturally reducing stormwater runoff going into the streams. You can see here they would mow. There are images where the tractor that would mow the lawn here actually fell into the Cooper River because they were just trying to get so close to the waterway to do a good job, and the tractor fell in. But you can see very short grass, and what would happen every time we'd have a storm or the wind, just chunks of dirt and parkland and open space would just erode and fall into the waterway. And that's why this is so much more such a significant benefit and value. Now you have those root systems, all this vegetation. Now it's like totally reduced that amount of erosion. One of the pollutants that riparian buffer reduces, and this is very common. This is the ball field. This is the ball field just to the right of what we're looking at. Just to the right of what we're looking at, you have hundreds of Canada geese walking around the park, grazing on the lawn. You see this in office parks, etc. And every Canada goose produces about a pound of excrement a day. They're like cows. They eat grass. Cow manure was what we used to use as natural fertilizer. A lot of times Canada geese are the same thing. So every goose will produce a pound of natural fertilizer every day. And every time it rains, all that waste would go right into the Cooper River. And it would cause huge algal blooms, especially in August and in early September. There'd be huge algal blooms. And this isn't unique to Cooper River. This happens all over the place. That waste has a lot of nitrogen and phosphorus in it. It washes into the waterway. It causes algal blooms. If you have that sort of a situation, all that waste goes right into the river, right? And in this particular case, this is a man-made lake, so there's a dam. So that pollutant just sits there, and again, in the late summer, all that green algae just starts growing because it's those contaminants going into the waterway. The value of having a riparian buffer like this, now that rainwater will take all that hundreds of pounds of excrement, but it takes it into this living filtration system, the riparian buffers. It's trees and grasses and shrubs. That natural fertilizer now fertilizes these woods. Now it grows naturally. This is providing an ecosystem service. This riparian buffer is providing an ecosystem service that no one has to pay for, right? It's filtering all that polluted runoff and at no cost. Well, a little cost. They paid for the trees and that sort of thing, but they're not mowing it anymore. They're not spending the money for the guy to come up and mow here. So there's some cost, but the ecosystems, it's providing ecosystem services for the water quality of the Cooper River, which used to be one of the most polluted waterways in South Jersey. There used to be 14 sewer treatment plants on the Cooper River discharging human waste, especially during storms, would discharge into the Cooper River. When I first moved to this area, on a rainy day, you'd see human waste floating down the river because the sewer treatment plants, so much rainwater was coming to the facility, they had to open up valves and let it go, or it would over and flood the sewer treatment facility itself. But today, we have colleges and universities and high school go out there and have competitive rowing events on a Saturday and Sunday starting now. You'll go up there and there'll be hundreds and hundreds of people around the embankment and their college students out rowing. So the water quality has gotten so much better for a variety of reasons, but riparian buffers are one of those. I lied. I have one more topic. So this is a sister organization that the Delaware River-keeper Network is run by a woman named Maya Van Rossum. She's the Delaware River-keeper, and she's an attorney, but she's all this great energy and all this focus on environmental protection. She runs the Delaware River-keeper Network, but she also started an organization called Green Amendments for the Generations. And all this is simply is that she feels, and it makes sense, that all of us should have a right to a clean environment, to clean air, healthy waterways, and healthy communities. And that should be a no-brainer. And it shouldn't matter who's in the White House or who's in Trenton or who's in Harrisburg. We should all have we should have a foundation that everybody has a right to clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment. But that's not necessarily the case. Depending on who our elected officials are, they could change the stormwater rules so now they don't manage the stormwater as well as it does today. It could easily swing back because they might say, well, that costs industry more money. That costs developers more money. So we should swing back, and we can swing back a little bit, and that is worth it. And the Green Amendments is all about the fact that each state should have in their constitution that everyone has a right to clean air, clean water, and healthy environment. Any project that's being proposed has to prove that they're not going to have an impact on people's quality of life and their environmental health. And so the Clean Amendment, or the Green Amendment, and I know Martha brought one of Maya's books, is over on the, and there's more information over on the table about the Green Amendment that you can read about, and you can order a book if you want. So Maya, Pennsylvania already has a Green Amendment. Montana has a Green Amendment, and currently, and New York just got a Green Amendment. Maya is out in New Mexico now working on changing their constitution so that they have a Green Amendment too. New Jersey is in the process. We were moving along much faster about 2 years ago, but it's slowed down now. So I wanted to get you an update, and I wasn't able to get an update exactly of where we are in New Jersey. I'll share it with you, Martha. I'll find out, and I can share it with you. But it's stalled in committee, I think is a safe way to put it, yeah. But the Green Amendment, the idea is if we can get enough states to support a constitutional change so that this wording and this amendment is put into their constitution, then maybe we can go and get and have the federal constitution changed where that, and it seems like a no-brainer that we should have the right to clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment. but that's not the case. And with an amendment in the Constitution, then that can stand up to whoever the leader is at the time. And that brings us to the end of the presentation. I wanted to make sure I gave you a little bit of information about the Delaware River-keeper network and the environment and some of the issues that we're working on. So, does anyone have any thoughts or questions? Yes.
What were sewer plants putting into the water to deplete the oxygen?
Well, all the effluent, the actual human waste, right? That, in order to biodegrade, and that, as that starts biodegrading, that absorbs the available oxygen in the water. So and it's not just human waste; it's fertilizers from our land. All those contaminants, as it goes in there, it starts eating up the available oxygen. And so, as that eats up the available oxygen, it reduces it. In fact, you can tell how clean a water body is, a stream or creek, by testing the dissolved oxygen in the water. And different insects, different fish can survive and thrive based on the amount of dissolved oxygen. And so where the Cooper River once had this whole host of naturally occurring different species of fish, when it became so polluted, all you found in there were carp and catfish and gizzard shad and other fish that could rely on, didn't need as much dissolved oxygen. And that's why if you go to the trout fishing streams up in North Jersey and in the Poconos, they're in that condition. They can support trout and other fish that need a lot of dissolved oxygen. That's because there's less input from sewer treatment plants or golf courses or whatever. Yes.
I had 2 questions, if you don't mind. You showed the picture of that river on fire. Do you know where, the most polluted spotter area of the U.S. is today? Or
today? No, I don't. Something relative to that is that's on the negative side. On the positive side, the Los Angeles River is a river that flows through Los Angeles, is on this amazing story of recovery today. In fact, if you're familiar with the John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John movie Grease Lightning, where they had at the end of the movie where they had the race, and they showed the cars down in a culvert of concrete, and the car went up on this side, and they're driving along, and there's just a little trickle of water down there. That's the Los Angeles River. The Los Angeles River, and still largely is that's the case, but they encased it in concrete because they couldn't handle the flooding. And so this way, they encased it with concrete. They put a concrete floor and 2 concrete walls, and that way, when it rained and there was a lot of flooding, the floodwaters could get right out into the Pacific Ocean as quickly as possible. Well, humans recognize that that's not the best thing for the river. It's not the best thing for aquifer recharge, where we get our drinking water. So they're starting to lift up some of that concrete and bring back and let some of the natural vegetation grow. And there's some great images on the website, and it just shows where one day there's concrete and an encasement, and Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta are there, to the next minute where there's willows and oaks and great blue herons and red-winged blackbirds flying all around. It still manages the stormwater. So when it floods, the floodwaters go through, but it's in a more natural environment.
the other question was, On our property, we do New Jersey State Forestry. I think it's classified as a wetland property. I was just curious, how does the Riverkeeper network rank the forestry service? Like, do you think it does enough, or is it doing a good job?
Well, there's the state has a Parks and Forestry Department, right? And then there's a U.S. Forestry Service. I know we've had issues where the Forestry Service will come in and create a forestry management plan. And I've only been involved with one of them up on the Musconetcong watershed up near Hackettstown, New Jersey, where they, it's not Ringing Rocks, it's, I forgot the park. They wanted to come in and do a managed clearing of the trees. And we felt it was way overkill. You know, they came in and we just thought that they were trying to cut down way more trees than they should in order to keep some balance and stuff. They disagreed, and they got the permits to go in and do the cutting. So we have had challenges with them, but it's how do you manage that resource? And that was, you know, some community, it's like so many other things. It's like some people feel like you should totally leave it alone and let nature take its course. But how do you provide access? If that's the case, how do you provide access to the people who want to come and use that park? You know, how do you keep trees that are dying or about to fall over from falling on paths and parking lots? You have to manage it somehow. And then there's another group of people that want to see the entire thing cut so houses can be built. So it's like this constant push and pull. So we have had some struggles. In fact, nearby here, not that long ago, in Gloucester County, there was a forested area, and the Forest Service wanted to increase warbler habitat or some kind of a habitat that required meadows, and they cut the entire forest down so they could build and have this meadow, and that was a big issue too.
If the Clean Water Act was a federal act, then who determines the oxygen level in the Delaware? Is that a state EPA? Is that federal? Like, who tests that and reports it, or has jurisdiction over people who may be polluting?
It's federal law. So the EPA just supported the Delaware River-keepers Network's petition, saying that we think it should be. It's currently at 4. We think it should be up at 6.5, which science has shown the baby shad and many sturgeon and many other species need for. So they reduces the stress level when they're babies, and there's better production and stuff like that. So the EPA makes sure that those regulations are in place, but they give that responsibility to each state. So Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and New York have the responsibility. In the Delaware River is unique because we have the Delaware River Basin Commission. The Delaware River Basin Commission is represented by each of the states. There's a representative from each of the states and the federal government. The representative from the federal government is from the Army Corps of Engineers. And so the DRBC has a science staff, and they go out and they manage and monitor the dissolved oxygen and other parameters, other pollutants and things like that. They do fish population studies and that sort of thing. But it's from that data that we know that the dissolved oxygen is at 4, and we think it should be at 6.5. And so it's EPA that's now telling the CCMUA, which is Camden County Sewer Treatment Plant, and Philadelphia Water Department, and Wilmington, and anybody who discharges, that they now have to change their systems so that less nutrients are going into the waterway. And it's unique that, I mean, it's not unique, but it's interesting that, you know, it's going to cost millions of dollars for the CCMUA to upgrade their system so that a better level of water, dissolved oxygen in this case, is going out into the river. But if you break that down into each resident, each ratepayer, it may only be, and I'm making this number up, it may be like $50 more a year. You know, where, you know, currently we might be spending $300, and many people will agree that, you know, it's, you know, knowing that we're protecting the river for all of the things that we've talked about, all the ecosystem services and all the benefits, you know, for a small, someone has to pay. And so if you have to pay a little bit more so the CCMUA can improve their systems, you know, that's, you break it down as an individual ratepayer, and it's a little bit, I find at least, it's easier to swallow. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.